Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Andy Acton. I'm one of the owners and directors of Frank Taylor and Associates, and we're primarily known for valuing and selling dental practices. Bought the business 20 years ago, and as Aaron says, as a result of that, what you end up with is acquiring a set of skills to grow and run that business and other businesses. And over that time, I found that leadership is critical if you want to be successful and grow a team and get that team to come with you on your journey. And I sort of do leadership's about, without force, bringing people with you on a journey to accomplish something. That's really it. And I think quite often it gets dressed up as something perhaps bigger than what it really is. And I thought what I'd do is just talk through, as Aaron said, a few different types of leaders that are out there, perhaps a structure in terms of what characterises leadership, and a few things to go away and think about in terms of what sort of leader you are, what sort of leader you want to be, but also the mindset behind how people behave. Because as a leader, not only does it impact how you behave, you should also be able to have positive influence over other people. But understanding how those people behave and work is really important. So to start with, let's look at some people out there who are leaders that are very familiar. Everyone's probably familiar with this gentleman. He's well known. I'm acutely aware that most of the people, if not all the people on here, are dentists. What you've probably now done is you've been drawn to his teeth. I imagine that's what's happening. Everyone's looking at his teeth and critiquing what they would do to that set of teeth. But he's really well known, established virgin. Within his group, he's known as Dr. Yes. You know, his instincts, his mood is, I want to do things. I want to find a way of doing it. And quite often, he's not so worried about the details of how it's going to get done. He just wants to get things done. But he's a very avant-garde, push the boundaries entrepreneur. And that style of leadership works really well for Richard Branson. It might not work for you, but there might be traits of how he behaves and how he performs that you might say, well, there's a bit of me in there. There's going to be a theme that runs through this, and it's authenticity. What you can't do is you can't look at somebody like Richard Branson and say, well, that's me. I'm going to become that person. That's where I'm going to go. Because if that doesn't fit with you as a person, it's going to fall apart. It's not going to feel congruent. It's not going to feel authentic. Somebody else to consider, and quite a different person, is this lady, the Iron Lady. The first female prime minister. I'm extraordinarily patient because I wanted to get my own way in the end. It really was an iron fist approach. And politics aside, a phenomenally successful woman and an inspiring leader. And again, you can look at somebody like Margaret Thatcher and say, well, that's not, I'm a softer person. I can still lead in a confident way, but I have a softer style and a softer set of skills about me. It may be there are times in your business life you do need to be harder. You do need to show that real steely edge. And somebody like Margaret Thatcher is an example of that sort of leadership. And then you move to people like Lord Coe, who started out as a runner. Quite remarkably, in 1980 in Moscow, he won the 1500 meters gold medal at the Olympics. Incredibly, in 1984, went to Los Angeles and won it again. So to win at the same distance over two separate Olympics is quite remarkable. And this thing about pressure being self-inflicted, and it's how you use it, that's real mindset stuff. Because if you find pressure overwhelming, it can be quite debilitating and crippling. It's really hard to kind of push forward and see the good that comes out of it. But if you can enhance that pressure and you can really take it within you, it can be a really powerful force. A point of note that's quite interesting about Lord Coe is he also arranged the London 2012 Olympics. And interestingly, he did it without email. He didn't have an email address. He spoke to people, an old-fashioned thing to do. And admittedly, he had a large team of people around him, but he chose not to have email because he believed it would slow down the process, and it meant he wouldn't be able to get his passion and his vision and his feeling into what was trying to be achieved. Just as a side note, it's quite interesting. And this is a quote by a chap called Malcolm Gladwell. Some of you may have read his books. Outliers is probably his most famous one. And he looks at sort of psychology and sociology and how humans interact. And in essence, if there's something that's not working, very often it's to do with the leader. It's to do with the leadership. It's to do with that central message which is being delivered to the team that's not hanging together, not really making sense. It's very hard for people to pull together and move in a particular direction if that clear vision and that message coming down from the leadership is a bit confusing. So very quickly, that's just a few different types of leadership, and you know, don't pigeonhole yourself. It's not a case of you have to be one thing or the other, but it's just a few examples, and there'll be many others out there that you can look at as well, just to start to understand what different forms and types of leadership are out there, and try and get a feeling for who you are and where you sit across that range of what's available. And there's some soul searching stuff in here. I'm not expecting you to write down that, you know, your exact characteristics of who you are and how you're going to be, but it's just to give some thought as to what your leadership style is going to be, because whatever style you have to be consistent in the delivery of it. It's quite disturbing when people are looking for direction and leadership from somebody, but it's not consistent, because they're not quite sure on which day or which hour they're talking to you, what message they're getting. So it's important to be consistent. Something else you can do that's quite interesting is look back at managers that you've worked for, and note down the things that were good about them. But this also does work in reverse, because you can also note down things that were bad about managers that you worked before, and just look at the characteristics of how they behaved or things they did that, you know, you can kind of write on a post-it note and keep for yourself, because you can draw in ideas from various sources. And quite often when we work with people, there's certain things about their style that we think that's really nice. That was a really warm way of delivering a message, or they always make people feel valued. You know, it's often said people don't remember what you said, but they remember how you made them feel. And those feelings are really important. But the flip side to it is we've all seen situations where people have delivered messages in a bad way, or they're confused in their thought process, and that comes out in how they describe their message. So look for the good people, look for the bad people, and just take some notes and just refer back to them, and just be thoughtful about how that might sit with you and your own style. Aaron talked about mindset, and there's a great book by a lady called Carol Dweck, and she distills it down into two sides of mindset. There's fixed mindset and there's growth mindset, and I thought it might be useful just to look through the two and just see how they compare. But as I talk about it, think about it in the context of it's not just about you and your mindset, which is really important, but also the people you're talking to, because understanding the mindset of the person you're talking to is critical, because if you do, it's easier to make sure your message is being communicated in a style that's going to be understood. Because if you're a positive mindset or growth mindset and someone's a fixed mindset, you can be saying all the positive things in the world, and all that will be happening is a fixed mindset person might just be shutting those ideas down. So you need to approach it in a particular way to make sure that your message is understood. Because in essence, mindset is about growth, and growth is kind of, you know, what's that capability and possibility of what could be achieved. And that's kind of the effort multiplied by time. So if you apply time to something and you keep applying effort ongoing, it's reasonable to say that there will be some growth of some sort. And that's where you move from fixed mindset to growth mindset. So the characteristics of people that have a fixed mindset, they tend to avoid challenges. They don't like being challenged. They also give up easily. If they try something and the thing they try they're unsuccessful with, they're more inclined to stop and try something else because they don't like to fail. If they put effort into things, they don't necessarily see that it's worth it. You know, what's the result I'm going to get from that? Perhaps I'll just do things that I'm used to. Perhaps I'll just do things I know. Perhaps I'll just do the things that I'm good at. They're also not particularly good at receiving feedback as well. And again, to grow, it's really important to take on board feedback, and that's how you can kind of improve your own performance and push forward. And then the last part is feeling threatened by other people. Quite often people with a fixed mindset have a sense of greatness. They need to be the best person in the room. They need to have all the attention. They need to be the person at the front. They need to, you know, be the champion of everything. But actually, you know, to grow, you probably do need other people to help and work around you. So moving on to the growth mindset of things, it's a different set of characteristics. These are people that embrace challenges. You know, it's people that say that was really hard and it was fun, as opposed to that was really hard, I'm not going to do that again. So it's people that like the idea of a challenge, but they see it as an opportunity to grow, as opposed to something that's daunting, which would be more on the fixed mindset side of things. They keep pushing forward. if we think back, we had Richard Branson on the screen a couple of minutes ago. He's got his Virgin Galactic program that's being developed at the moment. And a few years ago, in one of their testing phases, one of their crafts crashed and they lost a pilot. A fixed mindset person perhaps never would have started the project, but assuming they did, that was absolutely devastating. For a business project to lose a life must have been horrible and horrendous. And whilst he acknowledged it, his statement was, we're going to get out straight away. We're going to rebuild. We need to get better. We need to understand what went wrong so this never happens again. This is the persistence in face of setbacks. They also want to achieve mastery. And mastery, you may have heard the term about 10,000 hours. It takes 10,000 hours to perfect something. These are people who want to invest time in their craft and really get better and better at what they're doing. And they're prepared to commit to it over days and months and years to really master their craft. And as dentists, you'll be very familiar with this. You spent 5 years at dental school. You've kind of been through that path already, and you've acquired a technical skill in dentistry. This is now looking to apply that similar approach to your business life and seeing whether you can become a master in terms of running your business and your leadership style and your leadership skills. But learn from criticism. Like with the fixed mindset, not keen on feedback. If somebody gives you some feedback and it's not great, you can still learn from it. There'll be some real positives in there. And with the growth mindset, you will see that as your opportunity to springboard forward and learn because someone's given you something useful. And then lastly, it's about inspiring other people. It's trying to use your experience and knowledge to support the people around you so that everybody can grow. It's not about personal greatness. If I'm doing well and the people around me are doing well, then collectively that's much better than it just being a single approach. As I mentioned, it's important to perhaps do some self-reflection and see where you feel you sit in terms of, are you fixed mindset, are you growth mindset? And it might be you're not one or the other. You may have characteristics or traits on both sides. But it's also important to remember the people you're talking to, what's their mindset like? Because if they're a fixed mindset person, when you look at the traits of those sort of people, you can start to understand it's important to couch your conversations in a particular way. If you know a fixed mindset person is not good at taking on board critical feedback, you may want to just kind of approach it in a very delicate way and a soft way, and perhaps revisit it 2 or 3 times in a delicate manner to make your point. Because you may get a better result and you may get some buy-in rather than the feedback being very direct, which you may be able to do with somebody that has a growth mindset. So applying this to a practical situation, this graph's called psychological air, and it's looking from a leadership point of view how you may work with people in your team. And effectively there's three stages to it. There's instruction, there's delegation and coaching. So instruction, this is when you're working with somebody and you're needing to give them very clear targets, deadlines, and you're needing to be very specific and prescriptive over what it is you want them to do. You're needing to give them a direct instruction. When they've completed that task, they might come back to you and then get another instruction. And this is somebody who probably you haven't worked with for very long or may not necessarily have much experience. As that experience grows and they spend more time with you, it might be reasonable to move on to the delegation stage. And when you delegate to people, you would agree what the objectives are. You may have some agreed goals or even some shared goals that you work together on. And these are people that should ideally have started at the instruction stage, and then they grow into the delegation stage. And that's a lovely phase to get into, because that's somebody who clearly you're starting to build a rapport and relationship with. But from a leadership point of view, they're starting to take trust in what you say, because your communication is clear, and they know what's expected of them, they know their agreed goals, and you're going to be supportive. And then the final position you can get to is coaching, where you're now solving problems on a peer-to-peer basis. There's full disclosure, you're working together to solve problems and you're moving together as a unit. That can work with an individual person, perhaps in a surgery environment, or it may happen across a whole practice team. It doesn't really matter. The same principles apply whether it's one-to-one or as a group of people. Something that's worth remembering as well is that it's not always a one-way street. So it doesn't mean that because somebody went from instruction to delegation, the next stage they go to is coaching. It may be that within the delegation phase, some things didn't quite work out. And you may need to put it back to the instruction stage. It may be that somebody grows incredibly quickly and they move straight through to coaching. Thinking about this in the context of going back to practice life post-COVID, it may be that people who you used to work very much on a delegation or coaching basis, you might need to start to work with on an instructional basis, because lots of things in the practice are going to have changed. You know, there's going to be new standard operating procedures, there's going to be new PPE protocols that you're going to have to follow. And to start with, there might need to be some hard instructions of the team to make sure that those things start to happen on a routine basis. So don't be shy in moving people up and down that graph. But as a general rule, if you can move people on a gradual basis up from instruction to delegation to coaching, from a leadership and a team point of view, it's actually a better place to be. So there's 4 characteristics of leadership. So let's have a look at what those are. The first one is you need to be inspiring. You know, you're the champion of your business. You're the champion of your future. And you need to be able to communicate your vision clearly. If you can do that, people know what you stand for and they know where you're going. It gives them a path to follow, but you need to be inspired. If you're not excited about your vision, your business and your future, it's not reasonable to expect anybody else to be with you on that journey. And the second thing you need is you need to be focused as well. Don't prevaricate, have very clear goals that you're working towards, but set the rhythm within the business. There are 1,000,001 distractions in business that are going to take your eye off the ball, and you need to make sure that you stay focused on what's important to you, because if you don't, you'll get distracted, and it's your goals and it's your business that's going to suffer as a result of it. I mentioned at the beginning about authenticity. The values and the vision you have, you've got to believe them. And I don't mean pretend to believe them, you've got to really believe them, because if you don't, it won't come across as authentic. You will not come across as genuine. And one way of testing that is to ask for feedback. Make sure that people understand your vision. They understand what the value, your own personal values, what the values of the practice you work in. Get that feedback and reinforce it to make sure the things you're saying are being understood and make sense. And there's no room for any ego in there as well. It's quite crude, but there's a quote in there from Richie McCaw, who's one of the All Blacks, and his phrase is "no dickheads." And there's a book written by a guy called James Kerr called Legacy, and it looks at the All Blacks team, and it says, so what can business learn from high performance sport? And it's an outstanding book, it really is. And there's one beautiful thing in there. There's 13 things that he pulls out that business can learn, and one of them is the phrase "sweep the sheds." And sweep the sheds, in essence, it means that when the All Blacks play, they have an amazing game, they normally win because they're a phenomenal team. They go into the changing rooms, they shower down, they get changed, they put their tracksuits on. But before they leave the changing room, they tidy up after themselves, because the cleaner never has to go in the changing room after the All Blacks. Because whilst they're the best team in the world, they're not big enough that they don't tidy up after themselves. So the sweep the sheds is they tidy up after themselves and there's a degree of respect, and then they leave. But if you're interested, it's a really good book. It's called Legacy by James Kerr. And then the last one is self-belief. And this is something that comes from within you. You're going to need staying power. Running a business is hard at the best of times. We are going to be going to challenging times. They're not insurmountable. We're all going to get through it, but we are going to have to change some of our attitudes and how we work. But having that self-belief within yourself and get it reinforced in good friends and people around you who are positive, but you are going to need that on a daily basis, because it's going to be really important to carry you through, because your team are going to be looking for you for strong leadership. And if you waver, that's going to impact on them. So being positive and being strong in your self-belief is really important. So in terms of types of leadership, there's 3 types really. There's transactional, command and control. This is a very military way of approaching things. I'm going to tell you to do something, you need to go and do it exactly as I'm asking you to do. So that's the transactional side of things. I mentioned about coming back to practice life post-COVID. There may be an amount of transactional stuff that needs to happen in the early days. Some very clear directions so people know what they've got to do and when they've got to do it and how they've got to do it. But that is a very much, I'm going to tell you what to do. It's not necessarily a team working together. A better longer term approach is for it to be transformational. If it's transformational, you're developing and empowering the people in your team to make sure that you all grow together, and that shares the burden. It means that, okay, you're the central leader. You've got other people who also understand that message and they can deliver that message on your behalf. One that's also quite interesting that I quite like is laissez-faire. And laissez-faire says, I'm going to consciously not make a decision. So I think there's other people within my team or within my business who I'm going to create space by stepping back, and I'm going to allow those people to come into that space and make some decisions and show some leadership. And the best types of leaders and the best businesses tend to mix and match. You know, there's mostly transformational, there might be a bit of laissez-faire, and occasionally you might need to be transactional. But being aware of those three styles is quite useful, because you can use them depending on different situations. So leadership drives a business forward. I've shown where it fits with management, because quite often people kind of confuse the different, they kind of merge leadership and management together, but they're two different things. Leadership's all about driving forward the vision and the culture, and the management is the complexity of how you do it. It's KPIs, your key performance indicators, and targets and goals. It's that grip, it's the nitty-gritty stuff. So it's your authenticity, focus, inspiration, and self-belief. And I believe that to be absolutely true. And it's a quote by Anna Wintour, who's been the editor of Vogue since 1988. And if anybody's ever seen the film Devil Wears Prada, that's based on Anna Wintour. But I think the quote rings true. And a good leader is this person here. You know, a good leader is somebody who's on the mountain. You know, they're putting their team with them. They're all going to get to the top together. You know, it's not about being at the top and showing off and, you know, being egotistical. It's about bringing everybody on that journey with you, so you get there in the end. There's my details. There's my company details, and I'll stop the sharing now and I'll pass back to Midi, and then we can see if there's any questions.